Good evening. I'm Detective James Miller with the State Bureau of Investigation's Special Cases Division. For those new to this channel, I've spent the last 32 years documenting unexplained phenomena across America. Tonight, I'm opening one of Colorado's most enduring mysteries, a case that stretches back to the late 19th century, but continues to generate reports even today. Case file Colorado 1894-375, date of initial report, June 12, 1894, reopened January 17, 2024. Status, unexplained. The Molly Brown House, located at 1340 Pennsylvania Street in Denver's Capitol Hill neighborhood. This Victorian-era mansion was home to Margaret Molly Brown and her husband James Joseph Brown. Most Americans know Molly Brown as the unsinkable Molly, a Titanic survivor whose courage during that disaster made her a national hero. What fewer people know is that the Brown residence has been a focal point for unexplained phenomena for over a century. This case was recently brought back to my attention following a series of disturbing incidents reported by museum staff, beginning in October 2023. Before examining these recent events, I should provide some historical context. J.J. Brown purchased this house in 1890. If you have a story, drop a comment below and subscribe to the channel. The Molly Brown House, located at 1340 Pennsylvania Street in Denver's Capitol Hill neighborhood. This Victorian-era mansion was home to Margaret Molly Brown and her husband James Joseph Brown. Most Americans know Molly Brown as the unsinkable Molly, a Titanic survivor whose courage during that disaster made her a national hero. What fewer people know is that the Brown residence has been a focal point for unexplained phenomena for over a century. This case was recently brought back to my attention following a series of disturbing incidents reported by museum staff, beginning in October 2023. Before examining these recent events, I should provide some historical context. J.J. Brown purchased this house in 1894 for $30,000, equivalent to over $900,000 today. The three-story, 7,500 square foot mansion featured ornate woodwork, stained glass windows, and imported furnishings that reflected the Browns' sudden wealth from mining investments. The original case file notes that reports of unusual occurrences began almost immediately after the Browns took residence. The earliest documented incident comes from household staff in December 1894. A maid named Elizabeth Chambers reported hearing what she described as a gentleman's laughter coming from J.J. Brown's study when the master of the house was verifiably in Leadville, overseeing mining operations. Her statement, preserved in Denver police archives, describes hearty laughter, like Mr. Brown makes when reading his evening paper, followed by the distinct sound of a glass being set upon a wooden desk. When she entered the study, she found it empty, though the leather chair behind the desk was still warm to the touch, and a glass of whiskey sat on the desk, half consumed and still containing ice that had not fully melted. This detail particularly stood out to the original investigating officer, as no one else in the household drank whiskey in this fashion except J.J. Brown himself. Between 1895 and 1912, 12 similar incidents were documented by household staff. Unexplained footsteps on the third floor, doors opening and closing without human intervention, the smell of cigar smoke in rooms that had been vacant for days, and the sound of piano music when the instrument room was empty. The phenomenon that gave this case its notoriety, however, began after the Titanic disaster in 1912. After Molly Brown's return to Denver following her survival, reports of what staff began calling phantom parties emerged. Multiple witnesses described hearing the sounds of dozens of people conversing, glasses clinking, and music playing, typically between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., despite the house being largely empty during these hours. What makes these reports particularly compelling is their consistency across multiple witnesses who had no contact with one another and the specific details that aligned with the Browns' known entertaining habits. Descriptions of music selections, conversation topics overheard, and even specific phrases attributed to phantom voices matched known preferences and expressions of the Browns and their social circle. The most detailed account comes from Richard Walters, a night watchman hired by the Browns in 1916. His sworn statement, dated September 7, 1916, describes an incident that occurred around 12:30 a.m. while making his rounds. I was checking the lower floor when I heard what sounded like a full gathering in the drawing room. There were at least 24 voices, laughter, the piano playing a ragtime piece popular that season, and the unmistakable sound of dancing. I knew Mrs. Brown was in New York that week, and no event had been scheduled. I approached the drawing room doors, which were closed but with light visible beneath them. As I reached for the handle, the voices grew suddenly louder, as if the doors had already opened, though they remained closed under my hand. I distinctly heard a woman say, "James, you must tell the ambassador that story about the mine collapse," followed by Mrs. Brown's unmistakable laugh. I recognized her voice instantly, having worked in the household for 3 years. When I finally pushed the door open, the room was dark and empty. The piano was closed. The chairs were arranged as they had been earlier that day when I began my shift. Yet the room was unusually cold, and I detected the lingering scent of Mrs. Brown's French perfume and Mr. Brown's particular brand of cigars. Most disturbing was the discovery of a champagne glass on the piano bench, containing approximately 1 inch of flat champagne. This glass had not been there during my previous round, 1 hour earlier, and I had locked all exterior doors myself at the beginning of my shift. The glass was collected as evidence by Denver police, but was subsequently lost during a department relocation in 1924. Photographs of the glass exist in the case file, along with a statement from the Browns' butler, confirming it matched their private collection, which was kept in a locked cabinet when not in use. Between 1916 and 1932, when Molly Brown passed away, 23 similar incidents were documented. The phenomenon continued after her death, with reports coming from new owners, and after the property's conversion to a museum in 1970, from staff and visitors. The modern investigation was reopened following a series of escalating incidents beginning in October 2023. Museum Director Catherine Hoskins contacted our office after 5 staff members independently reported encounters that could not be explained by conventional means. The timing of these new reports coincided with the completion of an extensive restoration project that returned several rooms to their exact appearance during the Browns' residency. I interviewed Ms. Hoskins at the museum on January 23rd of this year. Her testimony provides a compelling overview of recent events. Miller: could you describe the nature of these incidents in your own words? Hoskins: they began subtly. Our morning staff would arrive to find furniture slightly rearranged in ways that didn't align with how evening staff had left things. Objects would be found in different locations, not dramatically moved, but noticeably out of place. For example, J.J. Brown's reading glasses would be found on his desk, rather than in their display case. His favorite fountain pen would be positioned as if recently used, with the cap placed to the side rather than on the pen. Miller: were there security cameras or alarms that might have been triggered? Hoskins: yes, and that's part of what prompted us to contact your division. Our security system showed no breaches, no motion detector activations overnight, yet objects were clearly being moved. We initially suspected staff members might be responsible, but by late November, the incidents became impossible to attribute to living persons. Miller: Could you elaborate? Hoskins. On November 27th, our head curator, Dr. Martin Schaefer, was working late cataloging recent donations. Around 9:15 p.m., he heard what he described as a dinner party in full swing, coming from the main dining room. He assumed another staff member had left an audio recording playing. We sometimes use period-appropriate sounds for special exhibitions. But when he entered the dining room, he found it empty and silent. As he was about to leave, he distinctly heard a woman's voice directly behind him say, "We really must do something about the drapes in here, JJ." Dr. Schaefer turned and saw nothing, but reported feeling what he described as someone walking past him. A movement of air and a momentary pressure, as if a person had brushed by. When he checked the security footage later, he appears on camera turning suddenly and reacting to something, but nothing else is visible in the frame. Dr. Schaefer's written statement corroborates Ms. Hoskins' account, adding that he detected a distinct floral perfume at the moment of the encounter, later identified by our historical consultant as Liqueur de la Rose, a French perfume known to have been favored by Molly Brown. The most compelling evidence comes from an incident on December 15, 2023. Museum guide Teresa Alvarez was conducting the final walkthrough before closing when she heard what she described as a man humming a tune from J.J. Brown's study. The security footage, which I've personally reviewed, shows Ms. Alvarez approaching the study door, pausing, and then entering. The camera positioned in the study itself shows her entering an empty room, then reacting with visible shock to something off camera. Ms. Alvarez's statement describes what happened next. "I heard what sounded like a man humming a tune I later identified as the Merry Widow Waltz. It was coming from Mr. Brown's study, and I assumed it was Kyle, another staff member, doing final checks. When I entered, the room was empty, but the humming continued from the area around Mr. Brown's desk. The chair behind the desk moved slightly, rotating about 15 degrees as I watched. I called out, asking if anyone was there, and the humming stopped. Then, very distinctly, a male voice said, 'Ah, excuse me, I didn't realize the hour was so late.' The voice had a slight Irish accent, consistent with historical descriptions of J.J. Brown's speech pattern. What happened next is difficult to explain. The temperature in the room dropped dramatically. I could see my breath. The desk lamp, which operates on electricity but is designed to look like an oil lamp from the period, suddenly illuminated despite not being touched. In its light, I saw what appeared to be the indentation of someone sitting in the desk chair, though no visible person was present. On the desk, which had been clear moments before, appeared a tumbler containing about 2 fingers of amber liquid. I did not see it materialize. My attention was on the chair. But when I looked back to the desk, it was simply there. I backed out of the room and called for security. The security footage confirms several elements of Ms. Alvarez's testimony. The chair does indeed rotate slightly. The lamp does illuminate without being touched. The appearance of the glass is not captured. It occurs during a moment when the camera view of that portion of the desk is obscured by Ms. Alvarez's position. However, when she moves, the glass is clearly visible on the desk where nothing had been moments before. Most significantly, audio analysis of the security footage by our technical team isolated a voice that does not match any of the museum staff and speaks the exact phrase Ms. Alvarez reported hearing. The voice print analysis was inconclusive due to the quality of the recording, but audio specialists confirmed it belongs to a male speaker approximately 60-65 years of age, with speech patterns consistent with a person who spent their formative years in Pennsylvania, but lived substantial time in Colorado, matching J.J. Brown's biographical details. The glass was collected as evidence and is currently in our laboratory. Preliminary analysis indicates it contains approximately 30 millimillers of single malt whiskey, specifically Macallan, a brand documented as J.J. Brown's preferred Scotch according to household purchase records from 1910-1912. Carbon dating of the liquid is pending, but initial chemical analysis shows characteristics consistent with whiskey distilled before modern production methods were implemented. I should note that no alcohol is permitted on the museum premises, and no bottles or containers of Macallan whiskey are part of the museum collection or displays. I've only scratched the surface of this case file. If you're still with me, I'll continue with the most compelling evidence gathered during our current investigation, including electromagnetic anomalies, thermal imaging results, and the disturbing pattern that seems to be emerging as we approach the anniversary of the Titanic disaster. I'll complete the story from where it left off. I've only scratched the surface of this case file. If you're still with me, I'll continue with the most compelling evidence gathered during our current investigation, including electromagnetic anomalies, thermal imaging results, and the disturbing pattern that seems to be emerging as we approach the anniversary of the Titanic disaster. Following the incident with Ms. Alvarez, our team conducted a thorough scientific assessment of the property from January 25 to 28, 2024. Environmental engineer Dr. Elise Whitman performed extensive electromagnetic field mapping throughout the residence. Her findings revealed significant anomalies that cannot be explained by the building's electrical system or nearby infrastructure. The third floor in J.J. Brown's study consistently registered EMF spikes between 2.8 and 3.2 milligauss, Dr. Whitman noted in her report. These readings occurred in patterns suggesting movement, as if an electrically charged object or field was traversing the rooms. Most concerning was that these anomalies followed us, appearing to respond to our questions or comments. During one recorded session in the Browns' bedroom at 11:42 p.m. on January 26th, Dr. Whitman asked aloud, "If someone is present, can you affect this meter I'm holding?" The EMF detector immediately spiked from 0.2 to 4.7 milligauss, its highest reading during our investigation. This occurred 3 consecutive times when the question was repeated, with no alternative explanation identified. Thermal imaging conducted by SBI technician Robert Chen revealed equally compelling evidence. Time-lapse thermal photography captured in the drawing room on January 27th shows what appears to be human-shaped cold spots moving through the room between 11:17 p.m. and 1:43 a.m. These temperature variations, typically 8-12 degrees cooler than the ambient environment, maintain humanoid proportions, and move in patterns consistent with social gathering behavior, clustering in conversational groups before separating and reforming in new configurations. Most remarkably, at 12:36 a.m., thermal imaging captured what appears to be 2 figures in a dancing posture moving in a clockwise pattern in the center of the room. The male-proportioned figure maintains a consistently cooler signature than the female-proportioned one, and their movement precisely follows the rhythm of waltz music that was audible on our audio equipment, but that no team member had initiated. I should emphasize that our investigation was conducted when the museum was closed to the public, with only SBI personnel and 2 museum staff members present, all of whom were accounted for during these recordings. Further audio analysis has yielded results that frankly challenge my professional skepticism. Using specialized equipment designed to capture electronic voice phenomena, our team recorded over 7 hours of audio throughout the residence. When processed through our forensic audio filters, Approximately 42 distinct voices were identified, many speaking simultaneously as one would expect at a social gathering. The most distinct recording, captured in the dining room at 12:14 a.m. on January 27th, contains the following exchange. Female voice, identified as likely matching historical recordings of Molly Brown. James, do tell the senator about our trip to the pyramids. Male voice, older, with subtle Irish accent. Margaret, I've told that story so many times even the ghosts must be tired of it. Laughter from multiple sources. Female voice, well, we are the ghosts now, aren't we? More laughter. Different male voice, aristocratic tone. Mrs. Brown, when is your next voyage across the Atlantic? Female voice, suddenly serious. I don't believe I'll be returning to sea. Some memories are best left in the deep. At this point, our audio equipment experienced complete power failure despite being fully charged and having no mechanical defects. When restored approximately 3 minutes later, no further voices were detected for the remainder of the evening. What makes this exchange particularly noteworthy is that historical records confirm the Browns did indeed visit Egypt in 1902, where JJ developed a fascination with pyramid construction techniques that influenced some of his later mining operations. The senator reference likely pertains to Senator Lawrence Phipps, a known associate of the Browns who attended several of their social gatherings according to Denver Society pages of the era. As our investigation continued, a pattern emerged that correlates with historical trauma. The frequency and intensity of phenomena increased significantly as we approach April 15th, the anniversary of the Titanic disaster. Museum records indicate that reportable incidents are approximately 340% more common in the 2 weeks preceding this date than during other periods of the year. Night custodian Miguel Sanchez, who has worked at the museum for 11 years, provided testimony that supports this pattern. Every year as April comes around, things get more active. It starts with small things, items moving, cold spots, the feeling of being watched. But as we get closer to the middle of the month, it escalates. Last year on April 14th, I was cleaning the main staircase when I heard what sounded like a woman sobbing. It was coming from Mrs. Brown's bedroom. The sound was heartbreaking, like someone reliving the worst moment of their life. When I went to investigate, I found water, actual seawater, according to the maintenance team who tested it later, pooled outside her door. It was approximately 2 inches deep, but contained to a perfect rectangle about 4 feet by 3 feet. The carpet was soaked, but by morning it was completely dry with no water damage whatsoever. The museum director asked me not to document this officially, but I know what I saw. Mr. Sanchez's account is corroborated by moisture detector readings taken during our investigation, which indicated that the carpeting outside Molly Brown's bedroom has undergone repeated wetting and drying cycles inconsistent with normal maintenance or environmental exposure. Mineral trace analysis of carpet fibers revealed salt content and chemical signatures consistent with North Atlantic seawater. This brings me to perhaps the most disturbing element of our current investigation, what museum staff have dubbed the Lifeboat Phenomenon. Beginning in 2012, on the centennial of the Titanic disaster, witnesses began reporting a specific auditory hallucination in the house between 2:15 a.m. and 2:20 a.m. on April 15th, the exact time window when the Titanic finally sank beneath the waves. Multiple independent witnesses describe hearing what sounds like distant voices calling for help, the creaking of wooden oars, and a woman's voice, identified as matching Molly Brown's, repeatedly saying, "Row, damn you, Row back. There are people dying out there. Historical accounts confirm that Molly Brown did indeed command Lifeboat number 6 to return to the site of the sinking to search for survivors, an order that the crewmen in charge refused to follow, fearing their small vessel would be overwhelmed by desperate swimmers. This was reportedly one of the most traumatic aspects of her Titanic experience, according to letters she wrote to her daughter in the weeks following the disaster. What elevates this phenomenon beyond mere auditory hallucination is the physical evidence. During these episodes, the temperature in Molly Brown's bedroom drops to precisely 28 degrees Fahrenheit, the recorded temperature of the North Atlantic on the night of the sinking. This temperature anomaly is confined to her room only and occurs regardless of the heating system's settings. In 2023, museum curator Dr. Schaefer set up an automated camera system to document this phenomenon. The resulting footage shows frost forming on the interior windows of the bedroom at precisely 2:15 a.m., followed by the manifestation of what appears to be a female figure in period nightclothes pacing the room. The figure's movements match witness descriptions of Molly Brown's reported behavior on Lifeboat number 6, alternating between issuing commands, comforting other passengers, and scanning the horizon for survivors. The footage, which I've reviewed frame by frame, shows the figure approaching the window at 2:19 a.m., placing her hands against the glass and appearing to weep. At 2:20 a.m., the moment the Titanic disappeared beneath the waves, the figure visibly reacts as if hearing something disturbing, turns away from the window, and fades from view. The frost on the windows immediately begins to thaw, and by 2:22 a.m., the room temperature returns to normal. Our technical analysts have confirmed the footage shows no signs of manipulation or digital effects. With April 15, 2024 rapidly approaching, our investigation has taken on increased urgency. Museum staff report that the frequency of incidents has already begun to increase, with phenomena now occurring during daylight hours, something previously unreported in the case file. On February 17, 2024, during regular museum hours, 12 visitors and 3 staff members witnessed what they described as a full apparition of a man matching J.J. Brown's description in his study. The figure reportedly materialized while a tour guide was discussing J.J.'s mining innovations, nodded as if in approval, then walked to the window and looked out before fading from view. All 15 witnesses provided consistent accounts without prior consultation, and 5 visitors who had no previous knowledge of the Browns' appearance or history provided descriptions of the figure that precisely matched J.J. Brown's physical characteristics, including a distinctive scar on his right cheek that resulted from a mining accident in 1883, a detail not mentioned in the museum tour or displayed in photographs visible from that room. Perhaps most telling is the testimony of 8-year-old Zoe Michaels, who was visiting the museum with her parents that day. Unlike the adults who reported the incident with some trepidation, young Zoe appeared unfazed. When I interviewed her, with parental consent and presence, she stated matter-of-factly, "The man in the room with the big desk wasn't scary. He looked at me and smiled and said his wife would be home soon, and then there would be music and dancing again. He said he was practicing for when the big boat day comes around, because that's when she needs him most. He said they have a party every year so she can remember the happy things, instead of the cold water." Neither Zoe nor her parents had any prior knowledge of the reported phenomena at the Molly Brown house, having visited Denver from Seattle specifically for a school project on Titanic survivors. Based on the accumulating evidence, we have established a comprehensive monitoring protocol for the period of April 10, 2024. A team of 12 investigators equipped with state-of-the-art detection equipment will maintain 24-hour surveillance of the property, If patterns from previous years hold, we anticipate a significant escalation of phenomena as we approach the night of April 14th, 15. Personal notes. After 32 years investigating unexplained phenomena, I've maintained a necessary professional skepticism. The Molly Brown house case, however, presents some of the most compelling and consistent evidence I've encountered for what laypeople would term haunting. The consistency of witness testimony across 130 years, the physical evidence that defies conventional explanation, and the precise correlation with historical trauma all suggest something beyond mere suggestion or environmental factors. What particularly strikes me about this case is what I would describe as its purposefulness. Unlike many reported hauntings that appear random or chaotic, the phenomena at the Brown residence follow discernible patterns tied to significant emotional events in the Browns' lives. JJ's manifestations typically occur in spaces associated with his work and achievements. Margaret's appearances correlate strongly with the Titanic anniversary, or occur during discussions of her humanitarian work. If we accept, even hypothetically, that some form of consciousness can persist after death, then the Brown residence seems to represent not a trapping of spirits, but rather a deliberate return. What some parapsychologists term a conscious haunting. The phenomena suggest not tormented souls unable to move on, but rather the continuation of patterns established in life. JJ's dedication to his home and business, Margaret's sociability, and her trauma regarding the Titanic disaster. Most compelling to me is the apparent interaction between the deceased Browns. The phantom parties suggest not isolated manifestations, but a community of consciousness continuing their social connections. This raises profound questions about the nature of consciousness and its potential persistence beyond physical death. I remain committed to scientific methodology and evidentiary standards, but this case continuously challenges my understanding of what is possible. As April 15th approaches, I find myself experiencing something unusual for a career investigator. Anticipation rather than merely professional curiosity. Evidence log, EMF readings from January 25th, 28, 2024, digital files E1, E47. Thermal imaging footage from January 26, 27, 2024, digital files T1, T18, audio recordings with EVP analysis from January 25, 28, 2024, digital files A1, A22, whiskey glass with Macallan Scotch, item number MB 2023-12-15A, carpet fiber samples from outside Margaret Brown's bedroom, items number MB 2024-01-27B through E, security footage from December 15, 2023, JJ Brown's study incident, security footage from February 17, 2024, daytime apparition incident, automated camera footage from April 15, 2023, frost figure in bedroom, 28 witness statements from museum staff, 2015-2024, 42 witness statements from museum visitors, 2020-2024, historical documentation from original 1894-1932 case files, temperature logs from Margaret Brown's bedroom, April 10, 17, 2023, barometric pressure readings throughout residence, January-February 2024. Case status. Update. This investigation remains unexplained and active. Full monitoring protocol will be implemented April 10, 17, 2024, with comprehensive analysis to follow. Preliminary assessment indicates phenomena that cannot be accounted for through conventional scientific explanation. The consistency of phenomena across 130 years of documentation suggests this case represents one of the most compelling and well-evidenced examples of persistent localized paranormal activity in the SBI database.